Now, welcome back to the show. Our next guest is a very near and dear friend of mine and is passionate about serving our environment and just really educating people on how they can make the least amount of negative impact and the biggest amount of positive impact. Joining me today is Masellis. Maris, how are you?
Hi, I'm so good. This is so awesome. It's great to see you, Kim.
Great to see you. I love that we've come so far in our friendship where we met each other through a kickboxing gym in Nashville, Tennessee. And now here we are talking about things that are even bigger picture, more important than, or not more important than talking about our environment. So you are a podcast host, you're an environmental activist. There's so many positive things about who you are, Maris. So tell us a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, this has been a passion of mine for a really long time, probably since I was a little girl. My mom taught me to care about the planet and the environment. And it's really seeped into every crevice of my life. And it started to bloom over and over again as I surrounded myself with more people that had this love and passion for taking care of the planet and really taking care of each other. And that's kind of like what led me to the work I do today. The podcast Critical Root Zone is my own baby. It's intentionally supposed to make you think a little bit deeper, hence the name Critical Root Zone.
Mm-hmm.
And my day job is with a nonprofit called Tennessee Environmental Council. So I'm here in Nashville still, and we're doing a lot of field work, boots on the ground, planting trees, creating pollinator habitat, and recycling roundups. But there's still this very important connection that we have to have with each other and ourselves in order to do that work. And that's kind of what my podcast is about.
Well, I think you just permeate the community with positivity and all the work that you do, between being a Lululemon ambassador and teaching kickboxing and just really encouraging the people around you. Every conversation that you have is very meaningful. So talk about Critical Root Zone podcast. How did it get started? What conversations do you discuss? Tell me more.
Thank you. Yeah, Critical Root Zone is actually my second podcast. The first one was called Zero Waste Trash Talk, which was a group of friends and I that wanted to put more information out into the community about recycling or questions that we had about different things going on that in the community that was confusing. A lot of it revolved around zero waste, hence the name Zero Waste Trash Talk. And it evolved into this community driven, like we had two or three events in town where people showed up and we had different community members and leaders speak on things and different organizations speak on what they did. And that's kind of what led me to get into my own podcast later in a couple years later after the pandemic hit and we had all of these really kind of challenging parts of life, right? Where everyone had to stop and really think about what am I doing here? What is my purpose? Right. And I thought, well, the podcast was really important to me. Unfortunately, my friends decided not to continue, and Critical Root Zone was born. Critical Root Zone is about getting to the root issues of what we know to be true, right? Like, so there's all of these things that we can do to better the planet, to, see the things happening around us and these impacts that we can make. Yet, there are things that are systematically rooted in our lives around us that kind of prevent us from creating that systematic change,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can have cleanups and we can recycle things, but what about the front end of that? And how does that all reflect into us and our lives? So, this podcast, there's a lot of different topics because sustainability, and we use this big grand word, sustainability, it just means caring about sustaining life, regenerating life, the circle of life. And my podcast is really about different stories with people that are doing the work not only for them, like for the planet and for the people around them, but for themselves, like thinking about how does this affect me and what the things that I do in my life and how does it vibrate outside of myself into the community and into the world. So my tagline is in order to love the planet, we have to love each other. And in order to love each other, we first have to love ourselves.
Oh, wow. That just gave me chills, and that's so true. I think you're exactly right. You bring up kind of a thoughtful conversation on your podcast, and it's around all different things. What are things that we can do better in ourselves for ourselves mentally? What can we do better to impact our community? So I love this. So Maris, tell us what kind of guests have you had on the podcast? What can we look forward to as we continue to listen and tune in?
Absolutely. The last guest I had was actually this very interesting conversation about aquaponic cannabis farming. And
Fun.
It is so different and so groundbreaking and so beautiful because they have this very sustainable or regenerative process, and they also care about their people in such a regenerative way where that's really the meat of my podcast. Funny for me to say meat because I don't eat meat, right? You don't want what can I say?
The bones of it, the framework.
The green juice of my podcast.
There you
But
go.
you can look forward to a couple different people I just interviewed that are doing wonderful work with the unhoused here in Nashville. Um, People that are looking into the food systems from Feedback Nashville. I have a guest from the Tennessee, or I should say, the Nashville Food Project, which they have community gardens and they teach people how to grow food, and they're actually doing a big study right now on the access to this food in the city, which is really important for systematic change. And then another guest I have on is the CEO of the Harpeth Conservancy that do a lot of work with the wetlands or any body of water in Tennessee, which is so important because we use that for our drinking water. And with regulations going on with the EPA, they kind of lessened the protection around our wetlands. And so we learn a lot about politics with them and the science that they do, the data proven that they've done to make sure that they can go to the front lines in our legislature and fight for our wetlands. So there's a lot of good stuff coming to look out for. Critical Root Zone. You can watch it on YouTube. It's on all platforms, but the major ones, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you'll see it there. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun, and it's been truly an honor to just get to speak with any of these people.
Well, I love all the conversations that you're having, and these are all topics that can really be translated across the U.S. as well. So exciting stuff. And then your Instagram, you give a lot of tips and tricks on your Instagram, plus all of the fun things that you do in your life. Where can we go to follow you along on social media?
Absolutely. So the podcast is at Critical Root Zone. And from there, you'll find my personal at the Maris Vibes with a Z. You'll find it from there. Thing is, I like to get down and dirty with people. It's not always about step one, two, and three. It's about just getting deep. It's about being real and transparent and showing people that it's kind of challenging to be sustainable in the environment that we have, that we've created with all these technological advances that make life easier and convenient. It's tough to go back to this primitive side that we all came from. So it's just nice. It's raw. It's down to earth, and I just try to connect with people as best as I can.
Awesome. Well, I can tell you what, I certainly have enjoyed having you in my life. So it's a lot of fun to have you on this show as well, and to talk all about the things that you're doing to make some change and to create some thought change as well. We appreciate it.
So much. It's great to see you, Kim. Thank you
Awesome.
for what you do too.
Absolutely. Well, Maris, thanks for joining. We'll be right back with more on the show after this.